Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show with your host, Phil Tarrant.
G'day everyone, how you going? Thanks for joining us on the podcast. And here we are. It's early November and already everyone's talking about what's happening over the Christmas period. I was in the shops over the weekend and lurking around buying things I really didn't need, and there's Christmas decorations all over the joint. So we're not far away. There's only 6 or 7 weeks left before Chrissy happens, and I'm hoping to take some time off in between Christmas and New Year's, and I normally use that as a opportunity to reflect and recharge and not think about work, but then also do some big picture thinking around what the future might look like for me. And obviously property always comes into that equation. It's a great tool for me, and I know yourself, our listeners on the Smart Property Investment Show, for creating wealth, and it's an exciting time to be in property. It's always a great time to be in property, and it's a great time for investors. Markets are starting to shift. There's changes afoot. We've got the lowest interest rate environment we've had ever. I remember when my mother got divorced, she was paying something ridiculous like 18% interest rates. Now we're down at people are getting sort of 3s and very low 4s in terms of what they're getting for their mortgages. So it's a good time to be in property. It's probably a good time to be a buyer's agent as well, mainly, maybe. And here to have a chat about that with me is Simon Cohen. He is the CEO and founder of Cohen Handler. How you going?
I'm going very well. I don't know what you consider a good time, but a lot of buyers out there and a lot of competition. So I think it's a time where buyers agents are working harder than ever. But
that's good, isn't it?
It's good. It's good. It's good if you ask our guys. Some people, they don't like to work too hard, so they might say differently.
You've been at this for a little while, and you're in many ways the default for me when I talk about the growth of the buyer's agent sector in Australia. I think you're nearing sort of 10 years now in your business, which is a great accomplishment, and one of the, inverted commas, early guys into this particular profession. Has it changed much, being a buyer's agent, what it was when you kicked off all that time ago to where you are today? Is it easier or it's harder now because there's more buyer's agents, or it's easier because there's more people now looking to leverage the capabilities of a buyer's agent?
It's a timely question. As we enter our 10th year in a couple of weeks, as you know, we're going to be celebrating our 10-year anniversary. I think about what it was like then when I started, and people were like, what the hell is a buyer's agent? What are you doing? You're crazy, to now where it seems like the in vogue thing to do is to become a buyer's agent. And so I definitely think it's a lot easier for people. For us, we're a business about always trying to stay ahead of the pack and trying to be the forefront of the industry. So we're always trying to think of new ways to create and set ourselves apart. But it is a lot easier being a buyer's agent in the sense that it's a lot more common, it's a lot more used, it's a lot more known than when it was 10 years ago. However, as I sort of kicked off saying when we began this, the market is tight. Properties that are going to auction are going for ridiculous prices. And as a buyer's agent, you have to justify what something's worth and why. Our job isn't just to pay a stupid price to get our clients off our books. And so it is a time where we have to work harder, but I definitely think it's a great time to be a buyer's agent. People want to use us. They love us. We've become part of the process, which is a great relief and a great change from certainly, 8, 9, 10 years ago when you had to sell the concept not only yourself.
Well, I've been a big advocate of buyer's agents for many years, and every property I purchased, bar one, has been through a buyer's agent. So for guys like me, they're a real asset because I'm time poor. I've got the skills, but they've got better skills than me, and they are in it every single day. So, we speak a lot about this on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. But for you and your business, Simon, the world's changed, and you spoke about in literally a couple of sentences some very, very complicated market conditions, market information. Properties are going up for auction right now in the areas that you work within that I know of, and one of them is around Sydney, way over what they thought they were listed at. So there's a real glut of properties out there right now for people to buy. Mm-hmm. Is that changing? And I really want to get into, how people should be thinking about property moving forward this Christmas period. But just to cover the market as it is right now, let's start in Sydney. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of buyers out there, not a lot of stock. So what needs to happen for that to change in order for it to move into more of an equilibrium or more of a sort of buyer's market? What happens?
More than most people think. I think a lot more stock has to come on the market, which is rare because stock comes on the market, but then those people who are selling have to move somewhere, right? So it's a domino effect. And I think interest rates have to climb a lot, and they're not climbing, they're dropping. They're super low, and it's much easier for people who had a budget of 1.5 to now pay $2 million for a property because it's almost the same repayments. However, they're paying $2 million for the property that was 1.5 2 years ago. So it's the same sort of property. So I don't actually see it changing for quite some time. I think people have to come up with a competitive advantage or a different way to buy property, because if you're just going to go to auction and you're going to be a number, you're going to have to just be the person who pays more than anyone else at that auction to secure a property. And I don't think that's the smartest way to buy property at all. And so I think unless you have a strategy or a competitive advantage, as I was saying, you're really going to struggle, especially in the marketplace. But then, I had lunch with a client of mine today who's made a lot of money buying and selling property over the years, and it's time for his son to get into the market. And, he wants to sign up to buy a property, and we're talking about that. It is a bit heavy, but he's like, in 10 years' time, when his son's 32 and it's time for him to sell the property, what's 1.2 now that seems crazy is probably going to be 2.2. So everything seems crazy now, but if you have a long-term view on property or you buy the right property, it's always going to be a good investment. It's the people who overpay for the wrong properties that get stuck.
That's a really important point. I hope you brought it up. You're talking about a competitive advantage and securing property now, which is good value or good buy. If the market is the market, as in people pay when we're talking about auctions, people pay whatever the number is any given day at auction, that's what the market is. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's good value. So as a buyer's agent, how do you know in this market where stock is tight and there's a lot of upwards price pressure that you're getting good value for money for your clients?
I think that's a great question. I think a smart buyer's agent, a good buyer's agent, they're going to know what else is around at any given time. So what the general market does is they're going to go to an auction and they're only going to see what's online, right? So they can only compare what they're seeing with what's out there. They're not seeing the off or pre-market stock that we're seeing, right? So they think, well, there's only one or two other properties that are comparable to this, so we're going to have to pay up or pay big for it. We're getting a real holistic view on the market and we're seeing everything that exists out there. So, for example, semis in North Bondi that were 1.6 and now selling for 2.1 because there's very little semis online on the market in North Bondi. But if you know the off-market stock and you realize there's stuff you can get off or pre-market for 1.8 or 1.9 instead of paying 2.1 for that property at an auction, you're going to have a very different view, a very different perspective. And so I think that's how we come up with what things are worth. We look at comparables. We also look at supply and demand. We also look at what else is out there. There is a higher price we'll pay for properties that I call properties with a rarity or a scarcity value, properties that don't come up very often. But if it's a 2-bedroom unit in Bondi where there's going to be hundreds of them, it's going to be looked at differently to a waterfront property in Vaucluse, for example.
When we come back, I really want to have a chat around this off-market properties and how buyers agents can secure that stuff and whether or not you can learn from those experts. Back in a moment. Welcome back, everyone. Here is Simon Cohen, CEO and founder of Cohen Handler, and he was just running us through his views and perceptions towards it. We're talking about semis in Bondi, and I was reading a paper over the weekend, and some young couple sort of, I don't know if you're across this one, paid, $600,000-700 grand over the reserve on the auction. It sort of went through the roof on this semi, and they buying it obviously for...
Did you see the photo there? They looked ecstatic. I've never seen someone so ecstatic for overpaying before.
I know. Yeah. There was tears. There was all this sort of stuff. But, they've dropped a pretty penny on that. For what I understand, they've got to knock the thing down and build their dream home on it, right? Up against developers and all this sort of stuff. That's face value. That's what the property's worth because that's what they paid on auction day. But to your point, they paid over. So how you go about actually understanding these market dynamics, what something is really worth, and how do you get these off-market properties? There's only you know about them because of your time in the market or your relationship with real estate agents. Can other people find these off-market properties, or that's pretty much a vortex or a black hole that only if you know you know?
So there's a few questions to answer there. I think one, yes, they overpaid because they weren't seeing. They were not in the know of other things that existed out in the marketplace. So they thought, well, they had to go hell for leather for this one because when's the next one going to come up? I think two, we get access to, and around 60% of the stock that my firm buys is off of pre-market. It's a substantial amount. And it's because we've been around for 10 years. It's because we've got 30 buyers agents talking to real estate agents all day, every day. It's because of who we are and our track record and the fact that we go out and leave no stone unturned for our clients. And that means getting them access to everything that does exist out there. What I also think, though, is if you don't want to use a buyer's agent and when you want to do it on your own, you have the time, it's about creating the strongest bonds and relationships that you can with the real estate agents in the areas you're looking in to try get that access if you can. It's never going to be as strong as ours. It's never going to be as sort of solid. I mean, you've got to remember we're repeat business for these agents and we have very close, long-standing bonds with them. But if you are out there trying to do it on your own, to your point, Phil, I think it's really important to create those relationships, keep in contact with them, and always get updated about what they're seeing daily so you can have that first right of refusal or that first opportunity before stuff goes to the open market. It's a lot easier competing against a seller to buy a property than competing against 3 other buyers who push the price up. And if you can try and get yourself into that position, you're going to be in the box seat when you're trying to buy a property.
You mentioned the relationship you generate or build with a real estate agent in order to be, I'm going to call it preferential treatment. You're going to get the first phone call when something comes on the market because a real estate agent will try and sell something off market.
Sure, why
rather than put it on market because it's speed, it's all this sort of stuff, right? And I know you're very strong within you personally in the eastern suburbs. You're operated in that space for quite some time, but you have buyers agents right across the place who emulate this same thing across other different markets. What's the key to forming a good relationship with a real estate agent so they give you the phone call first when some hot property comes on market, they want you straight away? You just got to be a nice person.
And what's the key to making someone like you? I mean, you have to, one, I guess, get them to believe you are a legitimate buyer and that you're going to move when they bring you an opportunity. They don't like tire kickers, like in any industry. And 2, it's creating a bond, a relationship, so that it's not even about anything else. It's just about that you're going to be front of mind. And if you can get that call before anyone else, you're going to be in a very strong situation.
And that's pretty much it. Just move with action.
Well, then it comes to a different point of negotiation and closing it out when you find the property. But yes, if they get you through 3 or 4 properties and you muck around and you take your time and you don't get back to them with your feedback, well, you're going to ruin that relationship. But
pretty quickly.
If you give them feedback that's constructive and positive, you're in with a good chance.
Okay. Let's have a quick chat around the markets because I know everyone's sitting here going, this all sounds really good, but what's going on? Give me something meaty or tangible. And I know you're a buyer's agent, so you're not going to give us all the secret sauce and you've got to keep something. I'm going to try and get at least something out of you. And you operate across Australia. So we'll just do a quick around the grounds. Sydney, you spoke about pretty scarce, not a lot of stock on market at the moment, upwards pressure on price points. Is that Sydney-wide you're seeing it or just mainly some pockets?
It's Sydney-wide. I mean, we are going to auctions in Putney, in Wahroonga, in Bellevue Hill. The sheer amount of buyers that open for inspections is huge. You go to an auction, there's 5+ bidders. It is a different marketplace out there than it was a year ago. It's crazy, and it really is right across the board. I mean, it's investors, it's owner-occupiers, it's everyone. So
it's good for real estate agents at the moment. They're not getting the listings, but they're getting the certainty of sales.
Getting a listing is almost like winning the lotto because you know you're going to make money.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually a good way to see. And how do you see that changing moving forward? What needs to happen in terms of putting more stock on market? To your point,
I don't think it will change very much because you're going to need an influx of stock, which isn't going to happen. Like I said, all those people are going to need to buy properties and you're going to need to see interest rates rise dramatically. And 1, they're not going to rise dramatically overnight. And 2, when you listen to the experts, and I'm not one of those experts, when you listen to the people who know, it doesn't look like rates are going to increase in the short or the near future.
And the challenge you said is that it might be a great time to sell your property, but you need to get back into the market.
Absolutely. Why sell if you're going to be homeless?
Yeah, that's tough. And what are you seeing down in Melbourne?
Similar, low interest rates, strong buyer. It's still not like Sydney. Sydney is a market in its own.
Yeah.
But we're seeing right across Australia pick up just because it's so cheap to borrow and people want to own and not rent.
And banks are making it a little bit easier to get money now as well.
It's so much. It's back to people are getting 95%.
And when you're working with your clients, do you guys do mortgage financing or
no.
They do that? You don't touch that stuff. So a year ago, 2 years ago, it was like, I want to buy something, I got a deposit, I can't get a loan. Mm-hmm. What are your clients saying to you now?
No, they can get loans. There's no problem.
No problem at all.
No, as long as they don't have zip money accounts still going or they're not spending too much on Uber Eats, they're pretty good.
And these things are sort of plaque marks against your name these days.
It's unbelievable. Really I know. You've got to actually almost show to the bank that you live an incredibly boring and cheap life if you want to get a mortgage, but they have loosened up a lot.
Pay everything in cash, right?
Exactly.
So Melbourne, what are your buyers agents down there, their conversations with or sentiments of how real estate agents are going? Are they hurting as much as Sydney real estate agents in terms of security
No, there's
listings?
definitely more stock, but it is still sought after. And you might have a lot of money, but it's still not easy to buy if you don't have that competitive edge.
So I'm going to ask you about Queensland. But
Yeah.
I'm going to go to a break beforehand. Back in a moment. Welcome back, everyone. Here with Simon Cohen, CEO and founder of Cohen Handler. We've been chatting around the markets at the moment. We've done the Sydney market and we've spoken about Melbourne. We should really get into the regionals as well. I'd like your interpretation of that, whether you get out there. But tell me about Brizzy. What's going on up there?
Brizzy's hot.
Yeah.
Our office is so busy there. It's unbelievable. There is a lot of demand. And what's interesting to see since we opened our office in Brisbane many years ago is how it's gone from a very investor-focused business to a lot of high-end primary res people. There's a lot of people wanting to buy $2, $3, $4, $5 million homes, which wasn't really happening before, which means that's pushed the price of prestige property up too. And a lot of people seeing that people are paying top dollar for finished homes there. So they're buying those old, unrenovated Queenslanders on the stilts, and they're doing incredible renovations on them and selling them for big profits. And so Queensland's been my most fascinating office because I've seen such a change in what's happened there, and there is such a demand. I mean, Brisbane itself, James Street, new hotels that have poured in there. It's a different city to what it was when I started going there when we first opened. It really is.
Well, I invested up there quite heavily.
Well, that's why you run Smart Property Investor
5-6 years ago, right? And I mean, sitting around waiting for prices to accelerate and rocket. What's going to happen there, do you think, moving forward?
It's never
going price growth?
It's never going to rocket like Sydney, right? But it's a very safe, slow and grow type market, and you get really good yields. I mean, I'm assuming you're getting pretty strong yields.
Yields are pretty good.
Yeah, and so I think, the way I look at Brisbane is the way I have looked at buying some of my investment properties, and they're ones you never sell. They just become income when you retire one day, and it's cash flow.
What are you seeing down in Adelaide?
We don't have an office in Adelaide.
No, don't operate down there?
No. So
any plans in the future, or you've got your East Coast specialist?
We always have plans where there's opportunity.
So are you out sort of buying out Perth way as well, or you sort of stick on the East Coast there?
We're not in Perth, but funnily enough, I was chatting to someone about Perth the other day. Commercial property in Perth has become really strong again, and prices are slowly starting to creep back up. So it may be a good time to be getting back into the Perth market. We could be having this discussion in 6 months and probably saying, I wish I had bought in Perth 6 months ago. So who knows?
Yeah, it's property for you, right?
That's property, right?
It's property for you. And when you look at your whole business, what's your balance between owner-occupied clients versus investor clients?
50-50.
50-50 straight down the middle.
And when I go to auctions today, it seems like 50-50 too.
Are you doing auctions yourself anymore, or you've got a team out there doing it all?
I love a good auction. However, hardly, I think it's around 6% of what our firm buys is actually at auction. I mean, we buy very little at auction, but I do love a good auction.
So when you're working with your more junior buyers agents, I don't know what term you actually use for them. You've got people who've been in the game for a long time. And
we only hire people with experience now. So they're all pretty senior.
Yeah. And when you sort of work with them on upskilling and when you're mentoring them on how to be a more effective buyer's agent, the skills around negotiation when buying an investment property, we'll keep owner-occupiers aside. If you've got to really reaffirm or crystallise time and time again the 3 or 4 key things you got to get right when you're negotiating for property, what would they be?
Don't get emotional.
Yep.
I tell all of my clients, especially when it's investment properties, when you start out, you write down a list, right? And you always revert back to that list every time you find a property, right? Especially in investment. It's got to be 2 beds, 1 bath, 1 parking and a balcony. All of a sudden something comes up in their street with no balcony, no parking, but such a pretty outlook. If it doesn't tick the boxes that they had when they started, don't buy it, right? So keep that checklist in your pocket, right? And the third is stick to the numbers, right? So my top 3, 1, don't get emotional. 2, check your checklist. And 3, run the numbers and make sure you're sticking to it, right? A good investment might stack up at 1.1, but if you go to auction and it sells for 1.3, it's no longer a good investment.
And do you think a lot of buyers who buy at auction get a bit emotional about it all and always overbid? Is that what you see them do?
I see idiots bid against themselves. I could actually one day, I probably will write a book on what I've seen at auctions. It's unbelievable what happens to people. I saw a woman at Cooley Auctions the other night literally bid $180,000 against herself, but didn't realize she had bid so high. I mean, people just...
The auctioneer take the bid?
He did, but when she thought she was wrong, he did the right thing and let her out of it. But a lot of auctioneers wouldn't have, and so she would have just cost herself a lot of money.
What? Did you watch her during that sort of negotiation cycle or auction cycle? Was she edgy, agitated, out of control?
Not out of control, flustered.
Yeah.
Flustered.
So how do you keep it cool at auction? I can see here's a headline for Smart Property Investment. How do you keep it cool at auction?
I don't get flustered.
You don't get flustered. So you know your number. You know exactly what you're going to bid up to and you don't deviate from it. That's the key thing.
100%. I think, you know, I'll let one secret out for all the listeners today. I think the key to someone who's running out of money at auction is when they stop and they got to talk to their partner or whoever's with them, and then they're like, another $5,000. The person who shows no weakness and bids strong, they're typically the person who's going to win. It's the people who have to regroup who are typically running out of steam and running to the end of their budget.
And I know the majority of the stuff that you buy is out of the auction environment, and I can appreciate why you do that because you've got a lot more control doing that. But if you do end up in auctions, are you, your school of thought, go in big early, you know what someone's going to go for? Do you sort of try and push the price up there pretty quickly?
There's no one rule of thumb, Phil.
Just depends.
I think it depends on how many other registered bidders there are. It depends on what the vendor's reserve is. It depends on so many variables. I rock up and I assess on the day.
What do you look for in the other punters out there sort of looking to buy? Do you, how they're dressed, what their demeanor is, whether or not?
The first thing I learnt in real estate was I sold a house to a guy. This was when I was a real estate agent. I'm like 20. I sold a house to a guy who every Saturday used to rock up in a Holden Commodore and wore a tracksuit. And he called me and he says, no one takes me seriously, right? Can you help me find a house? I was a 20-year-old hungry dog with a bone. So I'm like, I'll take as many people as I can that are happy to answer my phone calls. I sold him a house for $10 million that he wrote out a check for, the biggest check I had ever seen in my life. And he pulled it down and built a brand new house. And so I learned a long time ago, you never judge a book by its cover, right? Typically, it's the wealthier people who are more unassuming. And I've learned that as I've dealt with more wealthy people over time. I think you look for people who are confident, who are unflustered, and people who don't seem to stall or ask their partners, or, you know, it's the confident, cool-headed people that are your biggest competition.
Just your business as usual people who just know what's going on.
100%.
Yeah, you can spot them a mile away in an auction if you know what to look for. Right?
The people who rock up with a little folder with all the changes from the lawyer in there, you know this is their first auction. They've never done this before.
Yeah. And this is it also, you know, as a property investor, you see people waste so much time going to auction when they're so far out of the ballpark. They're either paying for pest and buildings and they're doing all this stuff, getting contracts reviewed before sale.
What's so sad is they don't realize the process. And you're right. They spend 4 weeks. They spend thousands of dollars. The auction price guide is $1 million. They think, I'm going to get it up to 1.1 and it goes for 1.4. And they're so shocked. But if you know the market, you know the ones not to waste your time on.
And do you find these are the sort of people who end up being clients of yours because they get so fatigued with this process of trying to find a property that they just go, it's time to outsource it to someone who knows what they're doing?
Hopefully he's not listening, but an underbidder on something, which neither of us bought the other week because the vendor was too high in price. He rocked up with his little folder and all these changes. And after he obviously missed out, and then the next day we bought something off market for our clients that he found out about, he signed up. And so, yes, they do. And I said to him, I knew it was your first time because you rocked up with your folder. But half of them do. Half of them are the people who end up getting so tired and drained by the process. They're the schmucks who overpay because they just get so desperate. They buy the worst property for the highest price.
Okay, well, let's round out on this, Simon. What are the best investors doing right now in this market to secure the best properties?
They're looking for the best places to invest. They're then breaking that down for the best properties to buy, and then they're setting a strategy in place to secure those properties. It's that simple. The people who aren't, they're going out willy-nilly, firing at anything rather than picking a target, aiming at that, and putting a strategy in place and having a plan A, B, and C. You put all your eggs in one basket, your chances are pretty slim.
Now, I was told just before we come on air that the last time that we got together was the 25th of January, 2018, which is nearly 2 years ago. So
I haven't aged a bit though, have I?
No, you're looking great. You know, you're looking great. Yeah, your business is still, you know, I remember last time we got together, you were sort of moving ahead, but you guys are killing at the moment. So it's good to hear. And we're 2 years on. But, you know, to my point beforehand, we're coming up to Christmas. I know I use this time to have a think about what the world's going to look like for me and make some plans for the next year, which is 2020. What should you be doing over this sort of next month and a half, 2 months as we go into summer and things slow down a little bit to plan for your future wealth by thinking about property?
I think you got 4 weeks left to buy this year. And I think once we hit those 4 weeks and you've got that downtime, I think you need to set your strategy in place for what it is that you want to buy. And again, what your plan B and C is if you can't. There's a lot of people out there rightly who think that they've got $2 million, they can buy a property X in Bondi, but they haven't been in the market for a while and they may not be up to date with how the property market's moved. And so, my advice is if you really want to buy, have 3 options about where you're going to buy and what you're going to buy for. Start with option 1. If it doesn't work, go to option 2. If it doesn't work, go to option 3. Again, I was having lunch with a client today and I bought his sister's house 2 years ago. And they thought, you know what? We'll rent. I bought their house. They weren't my clients. They had sold it. And they thought, you know what? We'll rent. Well, market's hot. Let's sit it out. It's 2 years later. The market's gone up a heap and they're now going to have to pay more for a worse property than they sold. And so my advice is if you're out of the market, get back into it, because as long as you're in the market, you're safe. It's when you're out that you're incredibly exposed.
It's good counsel, and we'll conclude with that. Simon Cohen, CEO, founder, Cohen Handler. Mate, I really do appreciate it. Let's get you back in again soon.
Thanks, Phil. Always a pleasure.
Remember to check out smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. If you're not yet subscribing to our daily morning newsletter, so the first to know what's happening in property right across Australia, smartpropertyinvestment.com.au/subscribe, or social media if that's how I like to get your stuff. Just search Smart Property HQ. Are you on social? Social media? Social media person.
At Cohen Handler, at Simon Cohen 84, just at whatever, you'll find me. Yeah.
Check it out. We'll be back again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.